Welcome to this edition of Workplace Culture Wisdom, a conversation series with experienced leaders. Welcome to another edition of our Workplace Wisdom series, interviewing leaders and experienced in a variety of circumstances, addressing workplace culture issues. And today we're privileged to have Nancy Bragard here. Nancy is an experienced host and coach in the transmission of practices to awaken collective intelligence. She's based in Paris, France, and has worked throughout Europe. And we're delighted to have you here, Nancy.
Well, thank you, Jerry. It's a privilege to be called forward. Thanks.
Thank you. And Nancy, you've had quite a lifetime of experience in interculturalism, as you might phrase it. And we know from the quote Peter Drucker has that culture eats strategy for lunch. And so you maybe share some of the experiences you've had where you've worked with one or more cultures that have either tried to find a way to combine or had some clashes or, you know, just that I'm fascinated by the work of an interculturalist and what it
Yeah.
means for a good workplace culture.
Yeah. Well, when I came across this trade, if you will, it was really an awakening because it's kind of my inner calling. It's my vocation as an American living in France. So as you know, I grew up in the USA and moved to France in my early 20s. When I really started honing in on what impassioned me, it was the intercultural component. It
Mhm.
was realizing myself that there is a logic to everyone's intelligence. There's a logic. People do what they do because that's what works. And when it's different from what I do, my human tendency is to say, what's wrong with them? They've got this all wrong. And it was interesting because when I first stepped into intercultural training, I did it in an environment in which I was comfortable, which was college students having study abroad programs here in Paris. Well, there was absolutely no awareness that cultural considerations were necessary. They said, hey, we're in Paris. People all drive on the right side of the road. They dress the way we Americans do, maybe a bit more black than the colors we wear. There are McDonald's. What's the big deal about culture? And when I would tell them that there was a big deal about culture, they took it on as a concept, but they didn't experience it until a couple of months into their stay. So it was always interesting to hear them in the beginning and then hear them halfway through their stay and then hear them at the end, where they had become culturally aware and a little bit more culturally intelligent about doing what we call the code switching. And then little by little, as I gained confidence in myself and the importance of what I was doing, I stepped into a corporate environment and started training international, intercultural teams. But I had to be very careful about how I phrased this to HR. HR, they were my contact people in organizations. And intercultural sensitivity was way too touchy-feely for HR. We're talking about the late 1990s, early 2000. And they were like, no, if you want to come in and do some language teaching, we'd be very interested. But intercultural training, they'll be fine. These are professionals. And little by little, there was a less resistance to calling it the intercultural component and sensitization. HR began to warm up to it because they saw that on some of their expat assignments, that the expats would return prematurely because they hadn't been prepared for the cultural roadblocks and the cultural differences. The managers said, we definitely need this kind of work. And we definitely need to become culturally sensitive and aware to the different worldviews and cultural realities that are out there and get it that a cultural reality that has someone else operating is just as valid as mine is for me. So this work was really about getting people to, when they were surprised, jostled, confronted, and really disapproving of what happened in a multicultural team, to take a deep breath, look at it and say, all right, this is interesting. What's happening for that person that they're doing it this way as opposed to this way? And when I say it's like decision making, it's how you hold a meeting, it's even meeting protocol. I mean, sidebar conversations in French meetings, it's like no big deal. It happens all the time. And American managers with French teammates who were holding sidebar conversations would stop everything and say, maybe you want to share with all of us what the two of you are talking about. So it was really important for them to get it, that there were different paradigms and different ways of doing things, that nobody was doing it wrong. They were just doing it differently.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. I interviewed someone, a European earlier, and he had remarked about how the Germans are always on time and the French are always late. You know, and you just can't judge. You can't bring judgment to that because it's just the sort of the social norm, if you will, of
Yeah.
varying behaviors. I find it also interesting, this notion of culture, in that we often have a tendency to think of it as a social norm in a way. But culture can be, French or German or American or Quebecois or whatever, but it can also be the finance department and the engineering department can have very different cultures.
Yeah.
And have you experienced some of those, not, departmental cultures also sort of coming into play as you're dealing with sort of national or social cultures?
Absolutely. And the company culture, I mean, there is a company culture for Renault, for IBM.
Mm,
And in fact, the research has shown that the company culture overrides the national culture. So it
mm,
kind of brings everybody together and distances them from their national norms. And the company culture really is brings in the color and the tone that everyone can work by. I think the biggest challenge for when I started doing this work was to take the time, because everyone knows that time is our most cherished resource, to take the time to sit down and talk about these things. And when I would have them, because sometimes HR said, might not like this idea to this team, but you're going to have 2 days with Nancy and take advantage of them. And I would always start out those 2 days, and I would see people sometimes in pretty resistant body language of, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting our time with this? We've got so much we need to be tending to. And I would tell them, I said, I want to, before we do anything, create a safe zone here in which everything can be said.
mm,
Because if you're not going to be talking here about shared perceptions, not shared, but cross perceptions of each other within this team, where are you going to do it? And when the intercultural piece has not been looked at, it can really get in the way of a team owning its full potential and using its full potential. And then we would talk some about, why would a multicultural team, if the cultural issue is not a problem, be better than a monocultural team? And they all knew. They said, different perspectives, different points of views, different ways of doing things. And they said, yeah, but only if the French could blah, 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 or only if the Danish would do this, that, or the other. And then I would sometimes, for example, if I had just a bicultural team, French and American, and I would have the French go quiet and hear from the Americans. All right, you all. The French are dot dot dot, and then I would write down on the paper, on the flip chart, everything that was said.
mm,
Late, as you said, too talkative, get in fights, way too boisterous, too emotional. And then I would say thank you. And of course, the French are sitting there, rolling their eyes and
mm,
some of them laughing. But they got that this was important and they knew it was going to be their turn. And then I would do the same with the French. Okay, the French, and we would do this in French so that they could really speak their from their belly. And then so the Americans are, and the same thing. And then I would ask them to look at the lists and what did they notice in these two lists? And it was interesting because they saw that the stereotypes or the opinions, perceptions of the others were as especially a certain perception of ourself. And let me share with you a story. We had a meeting once, and this was French and Americans, and there was a lot of talking going on in the meeting. We heard from everybody about the project that was going to be launched. Went around the table and heard from everybody. And I left the meeting first with an American who said that was a total waste of time. We have no action plan. All we did was talk. All we did was talk, and the only action plan we have is that we need another meeting to be able to come up with an action plan. And 10 minutes later, I was having lunch with one of the French participants in that meeting who said, that was such a fabulous meeting. We finally got to the bottom of how people are approaching this project. We heard from everybody, and we know now where we can go because everybody has spoken their truth. So, was it a great meeting or was it a waste of time? And that's why we always say, it's what you're talking about is you're talking about yourself in qualifying a meeting.
So the first time I came to France was in 1990, and I remember everything was really in a way sort of quite formal. If you went out to dinner, you wore a coat and tie.
Mhm.
And at all the meetings, you always so. I remember schlepping along to meetings, all of this dress clothes plus some during the travel plus some casual clothes. But I found, recently that formality has sort of slipped away in a bit. And so I'm just curious about what you've seen as cultures have changed and behaviors have changed and how people have responded to that.
Yeah, yeah. That I saw that also right away, and I realized that if I was going to be doing intercultural sensitization work in the workplace, I needed to have what I called my corporate clothes and only wore them in the corporate environment. Now that has changed, but it was also what it was saying. Again, I always told people there is always a reason behind behaviors, and instead of being, shocked by the behavior, look at what this is about. And the French are very, very keen on looking good. The appearance, the appearance is important. The formulation of an argument is important. If you've got an argument to make, if you've got a good project to plan, you have to be really careful in the word choice and how you present it. And so looking good was important. It isn't anymore today. I'm not sure what the element would be that has brought in that change beyond new generation saying, this doesn't matter. And it could be also an ecological concern. There's enough landfill, and we don't need more clothes. We can go in and be serious and intentional in our. I mean, they don't wear sweatpants, but they're kind of dressed the way you and I are right now. And yeah, it used to be a whole lot more formal. It isn't as much anymore today.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, the question I would always ask myself, whether wherever I was going into a different culture, is how can I at least be respectful of that culture? It doesn't mean I have to have a coat and tie on, but it
Yeah,
means that I at least um, carry a certain professionalism about my behavior, or the situation is such that I want them to be comfortable. I'll dress casually or whatever the case might be, but it's an element of respect for the
that's right.
and that would apply to any kind of meeting, whether you're meeting people from your own country or not. And
Yeah, that's
along
right.
those lines, then, for someone that's entering into their career, early in their career and finds themselves, dealing with a multiple of culture, what kind of advice would you offer, people entering into this world of uh, multicultural life, if you will?
Yeah. I would say be curious. Something that strikes you as strange, weird, to, take a low profile and say, I need some help here. I need some explaining to be done for me because where I come from, this, or that would happen. And that's not what I'm seeing happening. Help me out. So, showing curiosity is also showing a willingness to learn, and with time, what people that are working across cultures learn to do is this code switching I was referring to earlier. They know the degree to which they can, exchange ideas around the coffee machine, and then they can say, okay, come on, let's get this meeting going. Let's get things go. Because that's one of the cultural parameters, if you will, is relationship focused versus work focus. And obviously, we all have both of those, but for the French, the relationship focus is very strong and kind of comes first because you can only get things done. You can only be task focused if you've gotten to know this person, if you know you can trust this person. Whereas in the USA, it may be we're going to be task focused and get the job done. And when we know with the job done, then we know that we can trust that person. So it's really getting curious about which way works for you all, and then finding one's place and being able to code switch when called upon to do so. But what you were saying earlier, Jerry, about just stepping in and doing it my way, I was called upon to have a couple of words with the CEO. This was years ago, and he was going to be addressing his European senior management down in Nice in a big uh, seminar gathering. And he said, I'm going to ruffle their feathers. I'm going to show up in shorts and a t-shirt and beach thongs. And I said, you might want to reconsider that. I said, this is your European, so German, French, Italian, Spanish. I said, and these people are senior managers. And this goes back to what we were talking about. This was back when the dress code was not what it is today. And I said that they could take that as an insult. And he said, yeah, but I want to jostle them up some. And I spoke to him for a while and I said, you have a window of opportunity here to reach them and to impact them. And you are really giving that window of opportunity a bad pain. They're not going to be able to see through it if you go up there with, and I mean, he showed me what he wanted to wear. Finally did say, okay, I'm going to listen to you. And I wasn't there for the presentation, but I heard that it was listened to. And same thing, they always say it's good to start and to open up a presentation with a joke. The Germans find that very unprofessional
Yeah,
now. So
fascinating. Fascinating. Well, Nancy, you and I have both been involved in the art of hosting, art of participatory leadership community for a chunk of our professional lives.
yeah,
And what are some of the things that we have experienced, learned, or teach from that world that has made a difference for the intercultural work? The one that we have found really impactful is check-ins and check-outs. But are
yeah,
there are there other elements of that participatory leadership perspective that's impacted how you work interculturally?
yeah. Well, we always talk in the art of hosting community in France. We give a lot of focus and attention to the inner posture.
Mm.
And I love the quote by William O'Brien. What is it? The success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener.
Right.
And so we find it for people to be comfortable, and that's been kind of the calling question of our most recent art of participatory leadership seminars is how can we create a safe environment? It's funny because the French word is so much more appropriate. We call it accueillir, which is welcoming and basically hosting and being okay with what comes up. And what comes up may be an argument or a conflict, and to again take a deep breath and uh, be part of it, because in art of hosting, I mean, the word is right there. We are all part of what's happening and all part of the process to work through it. And so it's really being aware of where you are internally on what's happening. And that's and also again why we say never work alone, because if you are too pulled in and have been are really feeling kind of wrangled by what's going on, you're probably not the right person to be helping the audience to work through it. So it's I would say to just really be aware of your inner process and to keep it as calm and open to whatever shows up as possible.
Last question, and you can choose whether you want to speak specifically around French culture or not. But from your experience, you know, what would the French consider a healthy workplace culture?
Mhm. What brings a healthy workplace is um, the possibility to speak your mind.
Yeah.
and within the right context and within the right setting. But the French are working away from this very strong pyramid hierarchy to much more finding their way to be able to be heard. And again, that's what has me so impassioned by awakening the collective intelligence of an entity. And that entity could be a team, it could be a function, it could be a whole organization. But there is always a heartbeat. And by by using these practices of awakening collective intelligence, which is, World Cafe, open space, appreciative inquiry, having people in small conversations give life to their collective intelligence and understanding what has their heart beating. It's like, oh, wow, now we know what we need to do about this change management that we're being called upon to. And so creating an environment where they can be heard, they can express themselves and be heard, I think is what more and more the French workplace is looking for. They want to feel engaged, called upon. They want to feel committed and really empowered by what they do. And what's happening in companies where that isn't so, where people don't feel safe to step forward and make suggestions, they're losing their talent. So those that are becoming wise to how important it is to create this safe space for people to step forward and give their opinion, um, they're hanging on to their talent.
Well, Nancy, this has been fantastic and a real great addition to our series. Before we end, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share or make?
Wow. Well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about showing curiosity. I recently wrapped up a coaching session for an American manager who was brought to France in a pharmaceutical group. And when I met with her, the three of us met together, the coachee and her manager and myself. And I said, I think that this person's curiosity is going to take her big places, because she was, in fact, going to be stepping into a global role, not just France, USA. And she always was wondering, what has this happening? And she really got it, that there is a logic behind what people are doing, people's attitudes and behaviors. They all have a good reason, and curiosity can help you figure that out.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks so very much, Nancy.
Sure. Oh,
Appreciate our time today.
yeah. Well, thank you, Jerry. It's been interesting going into this.
Go to worldviewprograms.com to learn more about our healthy workplace culture program options.